Hey guys, sorry admittingly it is a little later to this particular review than usual. Um, all I can say on that count is I've had a hectic week and I'm upcoming a hectic weekend. Now, initially I think it's only right that I should, before I get stuck in, that I want to throw a couple of things off the bat first. Now, as you probably may or may not have guessed at this point, this particular review on an episode is part of a two-parter. Now, that being said, I was umming and ahhing all day whether or not to review this story in as each episode. So basically, the first part this week, the second part next week. However, I was sort of warring with myself whether or not to just review it as a whole story, which is just how my mind tends to work. However, that being said, usually I will be reviewing two-parters as a whole story because of the plans I have for this particular weekend, without getting into too much detail. I just, one, I ain't got the right mentality for it today, and two, just basically I haven't got the time. I just haven't got the time for it, to be brutally honest with you. Now, that being said, I still wanted to give the people who have been watching me week in, week out still a little something, so I just thought I'd split it in two, and how appropriate with it being a two-parter. Now then, in case you haven't guessed and you don't know your Doctor Who episodes in chronological or in order, it's this particular episode is Aliens of London. Now, for background information, when I say, I think I said a couple of weeks ago, quite recently. I can't remember specifically what I was reviewing, but I remember stating on one of my feeds, one of my videos, is that there wasn't a lot of background information. Well, this one, we'll put it this way, this one, wish it had it so good, because basically the information I tried to salvage, I tried to find, was bare next to none. I've genuinely got a note here just saying, written by Russell T Davies, and that's all I could find. That, and basically a lot of the scenes in Albion Hospital in this episode was actually filmed in, I can't distinctively remember the a hospital in Cardiff, which pretty much speaks for itself. That's all I've got. Now, that being said, as I just recently watched this episode, Russell T Davies, I think quite unfairly, to be fair, has been pigeonholed in his, as people like to do, they like to categorise their writers and label them, is the correct word I'm looking for. And I think it's unfair. I think it's fair to say, however unfair it may seem, that Russell T Davies has been written for his what is so neatly referred to as kitchen sink drama, and basically what that means is it's drama in the more believable sense, if hopefully best way to describe it. Now, that being said, for some reason, and admittingly, I know this is just strict genuine opinion, I just feel it complements Doctor Who. And basically, this episode, it explores that even though it's all well and good that the Doctor travels and shows all these companions, all these great places of time and space, what happens to the people that are left behind? What happens to the companions, friends and family after that particular person has gone? And bizarrely enough, no matter how old Doctor Who was, it never really got explored truly until this episode. I feel it got flirted very rarely in the classic Who series. But we never truly explored that until, like I just stated, this episode. And admittedly, this is yet another TARDIS malfunction, and the Doctor didn't intend for Rose to be gone for such a lengthy period of time. However, that being said, we look at Mickey, we look at Jackie Tyler, great characters I might add. I do have a soft spot for Mickey, and we will explore why at a later date in the series, as we see that character develop. Spoiler warning. And we see the emotional effect it has on Rose, you know, that she's realised that, wow, you know what, they're right to a certain extent. She feels bad, and you can see in her face, again, I keep bringing it up, Billie Piper's great for facial expressions, and you can see in her face that she genuinely regrets leaving these people behind. But I can't remember, I didn't quote it, but she said something very similar to Mickey in a case of, this is, you know, basically what she's seen, what there is to see, and she's well aware of the fact that there is so much more to see. How can she just stay there? And to be honest with you, I think it's fair to say that if a lot of us was in Billie Piper's predicament, either stick around to keep your friends and family happy, or travel through the universe, uncover its wonders, and see through time and space, it is understandably a hard decision. Excuse me. Now, again, I keep bringing up Russell T Davies's basically his writing, and it. As I was watching this episode, I genuinely just missed, you know, the opening sequence, because I was looking around trying to find a note and a pen and what have you. So I missed, you know, basically when it says who wrote this particular episode, I genuinely just missed it. I had an idea Russell T Davies wrote this particular episode, but without sounding pretentious, just watching this episode clarified it, because like I've just previously stated, through the grittiness and the believability of the characters that are portrayed in this episode, it creates a nuance of Russell T Davies. And again, like I'm aware of the fact that I've just previously stated, this is one of the many reasons Russell T Davies is great for this type of show, because I genuinely believe it does complement the episode. Without saying too much, but I was thinking about it not long just before I was doing this review, and spoiler warning, just in case, you don't really see that much of it with Stephen Moffat as head writer. Yes, he does bring other dimensions to the show that I'm not denying. However, that being said, the way that Russell T Davies explores the characters around these companions to the manner in which he does, I feel has been lost. I think it's safe to say within recent years. I think the show has missed that characterization that I feel is needed upon a show like this, because I genuinely believe with a show like Doctor Who, when you let your imagination go to far off places, and you let your, again, strictly speaking from a writer's perspective, when you write your characters to go off to these far off places, I think it's important for the reader, the viewer, whatever medium you portray your entertainment, I feel it's important to reassure your potential audience to know that these are still human beings. Basically, I know I got sidetracked there. I do apologise. We just mentioning Russell T Davies' name. Basically, the point I was trying to make is the foreshadowing. Now, I know that's a word I've already previously used, but in terms of the Big Ben. Now, it's only as we look back on these episodes that we know how much foreshadowing it is portrayed in these particular episodes. And all I'm going to say is Big Ben, when it gets smashed, and I like how they bring it up at a later episode, and obviously I will speak of it again when we get there. Another thing I wanted to mention as well, I put a little side note here stating the Doctor's knowledge into the human psyche, and basically what I was trying to get at is he seems very aware of human history, events that are yet to happen in human history. But it's bizarre, as not long after this ship hits Big Ben, he becomes oblivious to the events around him. It's almost as if, I don't know when the humanity allegedly gets their first contact with another alien race. So I remember, bizarrely enough, I remember from the very first time I watched this episode, from the perspective of that 11-year-old I once was. I basically remember thinking, well, it's so bizarre, having known that the Doctor has been shown to have such a knowledge of future events concerning human history, that he didn't know First Contact. As was this intentional? Again, from the writer's perspective, I don't know. I honestly couldn't say. I like to think it was accidental, because the Doctor not actually knowing what was going on only adds to the show, not only creates, adds another, the word of the episode today, but it's true. They added another nuance for the character, and it shows him in some bizarre way to be quite vulnerable, that the Doctor doesn't actually know anything. I do like that portrayal of the Doctor, and the Doctor just happened to didn't know what was going on. Not at first, anyway. Now, another side note to put on was Andrew Marr. Now, I think it's safe to say that, I know of him. I am aware of him. But I love how he played a jaded caricature version of himself in this episode. For those who don't know, Andrew Moore rather, was the journalist. He's basically in real life too, as it happens. He's a news reporter that reports things very much in the political contrast. Now, the Slitheen. I like how there was a particular scene, how it let the audience know that these immediately were the three characters I was talking. The first three Slitheen you see in Downing Street. I like how they let the audience know that they was automatically the antagonists of the piece. Because I enjoy my fiction in terms of letting your audience know something before your characters do, and it very much shows this. Sometimes it's fun the other way around, but personally, me, I can only speak from personal experience. I like. It's hard to. How can I describe it? I sometimes like knowing a certain plot, or what is a certain plot twist, before the characters do, because then you can see the reaction of your characters. And I think it works all ways. You can be more creative writing from a writer's perspective. You can have fun enjoying watching the characters you love, their reaction. And obviously it's a great opportunity for actors to get their acting chops out. So basically that's why I like certain plots revealed to the audience before the characters. Let's talk about now, as I previously, very recently stated in a very recent upload I did, I try to avoid political topics on my channel. However, that being said, an episode based in Parliament, it's hard to avoid that. And all I'm going to say, even though I will cover it a lot more next week, is I do enjoy that it potentially lets the audience, the younger segment of the audience, it gave them an insight into parliamentary politics. And I do like that, because I think with certain plots as much as this, it shows the viewer that you can have an educational episode, but that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a boring one. Now, it might have been just me, but basically personally speaking, I saw the seeds, for lack of a better term, of the development of Mickey Smith. Now, admittingly, from what we know about Mickey Smith now, obviously this is a very earlier version of Mickey Smith, but out of all the characters in the show's lore, believe it or not, if you were to ask me which character that isn't the Doctor, or isn't necessarily a main character, which character have you seen personally speaking, that has had the most development? That's got to be Mickey Smith, because given what we know now, you already see the wheels starting to change about this person. Who, comparing him to how he was in Rose, we already see not necessarily significant differences, but we do start to see subtle differences. Basically, I keep using that word. I try to stop and ahhing. I know. Did it again. Now, I like how the show basically acknowledges its continuity in terms of what the Doctor did for Earth in terms of the classic series. And I love how the government just has knowledge of the Doctor, and it's obvious it's because of UNIT. I like how it reintroduces UNIT, and basically, you know, I like how the government are so used to the Doctor that all someone would have to do on a like Jackie similarly did, is speak to someone on the phone. They type Doctor Blue Box, and red sirens, like red noises. Trying to think of the correct word. What's the correct word? Basically, alarms. I couldn't believe I couldn't think of that word up. I like how the alarms were set off as soon as someone put the Doctor Blue Box, because that indicates to the audience that this is a government, obviously in fiction, this is a British government, that is already aware, that is already familiar with the Doctor. And it's that sort of realism that I've always enjoyed. And I like how a show isn't necessarily 100% faithful to its continuity, but it does acknowledge it. And I feel it does help a show like Doctor Who, that even though I'm aware that a show of this stature needs to refresh its image now and again, that doesn't mean you should not acknowledge a continuity. And episodes like this acknowledges its past, which I do appreciate. All I'm going to say is the last scene, the cliffhanger. Now, I don't think I really need to mention it, but I'm going to mention it anyway, that this is the first cliffhanger Doctor Who has ever had since 1989 Survival. But I genuinely feel it was a good cliffhanger in terms of, you see, again, Christopher Eccleston gets his chops out in this episode, where you see in his facial expression, he's coming to realise that this is this trap that was obviously laid out for the Doctor and these professionals, and you can see him realising that whoever this was that sent the ship out to destroy Big Ben would obviously be the people masterminding trying to get these people killed. And seeing his realisation, and it's almost as if he's inviting the audience to suddenly become very worried with the Doctor, as he realises that obviously this is obviously a plot twist, and he's surrounded himself by people that potentially might want to do him harm. And I like how the episode is inviting your audience. A lot of Russell T Davies is brilliant for inviting the audience, inviting the viewer to feel whatever particular character it just is happened to be feeling at that particular moment in time. Now, that being said, there is a particular episode that I won't mention until I get to that point that does so in a spectacular fashion. Also, I wanted to quickly mention is, for those who are very in sync with the Doctor Who lore, this is actually the debut of Hoshi Sato. Now, I've never pronounced that name, believe it or not, for some bizarre reason. But yeah, this was the Doctor that was with the Doctor, the nurse, the scientist, the medical nurse that was with the Doctor as he was performing the autopsy on the pig. That was actually initially, from an in-character perspective, that was Hoshi Sato. Now, basically, I think it was just a happy accident, and now I could be wrong stating that. Obviously, they rehired her to do a role in Torchwood, and as time went on, again Russell T Davies is great for tying things up together, and he just thought, well, since you look the same, you might as well be the same character in a very later on Torchwood episode, and that particular episode does actually give an acknowledgement to this episode. If I didn't sound convoluted, I hope I wasn't didn't sound as convoluted as I thought I did. And also I enjoyed the introduction of Harriet Jones. Now again, I keep using that word, foreshadowing, and this is, I love it. There's no better way to describe it. It's knowing what I know now as a viewer, and knowing the significance of these characters have, only adds to my enjoyment, and I hope it adds to your enjoyment too. Now, as always, as my reviews usually do, I wrote a paragraph into my thoughts and my rating of the episode, and I wrote, Doctor Who Aliens of London has great storyline building and places its pieces perfectly for the first part of the plot. With its kitchen sink drama and gritty dramatic depth within the characters only complements the story more. With a fresh new alien and great twist to follow, I'm left to give this episode an 8 out of 10. Hope you enjoyed this review, and please come back for the second part. As always, Dancing Burrow.